Good evening, everyone. I will now call to order the regular City Council meeting of July 13th, 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held electronically, and members of council are participating remotely pursuant to the council's electronic participation policy. Public access to the meeting is available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast and Xfinity subscribers and on the city's YouTube channel online. Public access is also available by telephone by utilizing the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. All callers will be muted and may only comment during the times allotted for public comment as indicated on the agenda. If you are on the phone line waiting to speak to council and are also watching the meeting on YouTube or Channel 8, please know that there are a couple seconds of delay with the live stream. Please turn down your computer or TV volume as we approach the sections of the agenda reserved for public invited to be heard, so you can hear the council meeting on the phone line and to prevent background noise when you're unmuted to speak. Those calling in and wishing to speak to council may text 303-450-8757 to sign up to provide public comment. Please note that you must connect to the City Council meeting by calling the separate call-in number listed on the agenda. If you prefer to not text your name to the clerk, please speak up and indicate your desire to provide public comment when prompted at the appropriate times. Once you have been recognized, state your name and address and provide your comments to council. Thank you for following these directions and for maintaining meeting decorum tonight. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Here.
Councilmember Witkovich.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Downing.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Duran Malika.
Here.
Councilmember Escobar.
Here.
Excellent. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. So we have our flag. So if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Can everyone see the flag? Yes? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, next item, response to citizen inquiry. City Manager Guyer, do we have anything this evening?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. One item that I would share that's of general interest to residents this evening is that we are going to be opening Kiwanis Pool on Wednesday of this week. I don't have the specific hours yet, but I'll get that out to all of you, and we'll share that on our social media channels. We do have limited staffing in terms of pivoting, and because regulations were loosened, we're able to refocus efforts on opening Kiwanis Pool. And so we'll have a maximum capacity of 30, and then we'll increase that to 50 individuals that can be at the pool in any given setting. So we'll share more of that information as we move forward into Wednesday's opening, but I'm really proud that staff's been able to be super flexible and figure out how to make this work in light of the different health department regulations and restrictions. And then we were pleased to reach the point that we were able to rectify all the issues that we had during construction of the improvements to Kiwanis Pool. So hope our residents take advantage of getting out to Kiwanis Pool. Certainly there have been some really hot days in recent weeks, and I'm sure many hot days ahead of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Any agenda additions or deletions tonight? No. Okay, we're moving into public invited to be heard, 5 minutes per speaker. This is an opportunity for public comment on any item not set for public hearing. Statements are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Statements must be related to city business and limited to matters of community interest. Joanna, has anyone signed up to speak to council?
I don't have anybody signed up in advance. I haven't received any emails or voicemails, but there are people on the phone line. So I'll go ahead and unmute those callers.
Okay.
And then if they wish to speak up.
How many are you unmuting? All of them at once?
Yes, actually, it looks like there is just one caller. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if they'd like to provide public input, but
Okay, so anyone on the line, do you want to identify yourself and make a statement? I don't hear anything. Is that all?
that is all.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. All right, we're moving into communications. We will start with Ward 1 this time. Councilmember Witkovich, would you like to begin?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. A few things I'll mention tonight. Since our last meeting, I believe, we've had the grab and go food truck events, which were a real big hit, and I enjoyed going out there for a couple nights. I'm looking forward to doing those again in August. We had our last Elevate Small Business Grant Task Force meeting on Friday, July 2nd. So that grant has now wrapped up. And I just wanted to pass along additional thanks to the staff for pretty much making that grant happen. I think they did exactly what we all directed them to do. And I think it was a huge success, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So that went really well. I was also really proud to be part of the July 4th pool car cruise. That was lots of fun to drive around in a convertible. It was really, really warm, but it was lots of fun. And lots of people came out, which was really great. We wish we could have done more roads, but unfortunately it just didn't work out that way. But hopefully everyone who saw it really appreciated it. And then let's see, I had Parks and Rec Advisory Board last Thursday. They are looking at their budget, and next month they're going to be voting on that, and then they'll be bringing that to us. I also got to hear about a really exciting project, the Grange Hall Creek project. It's kind of over here off of Washington, near where the Honey Bear used to be. There's this huge kind of detention area, lots of trees, and I'm really excited to see we've got a project to revamp that whole area. So, hopefully we'll be hearing more about that soon. That's all I've got for tonight. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson?
Ashley said it perfectly. Grab and go events were fantastic. It was great being amongst the community, and the 4th of July parade was really an inspiring day and very uplifting. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Downing?
Thank you. Just have a couple things. I participated in the July 4th parade, and it really was a lot of fun. And I was able to ride in the Pacer car. So great fun for that. Grab and Go was a great success. Everybody really enjoyed it. So thanks to the staff. I mean, they did a great job putting that together, and I appreciate it. And then just one shout out I have for a senior that actually graduated this past May from high school, and he is moving on to college, received a substantial grant from NYI, which is the Northland Youth Incorporation. So that will help him in his at least his first year of college. So congratulations, Brandon.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Brown?
Sorry. I attended the NERA meeting last week. It's that time of the year. We were doing our accounting, checking our, balancing, looking at our financials. We're really starting to dig into the marketplace and the pros and cons of the COVID incidents that are happening. We don't have any new news. I'm looking at my notes. We didn't have any new news, though. Overall, the meeting went very well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to first of all thank the staff for all the hard work they did to make the food truck grab and go such a big success, and the July 4th Cool Car Cruise. I participated in both of those, and I wanted to thank the staff. And also the goodie bag that we were handing out. I've got a lot of comments back, people very appreciative for both the gift cards for local restaurants and also the other kind of toys and the sidewalk chalk and different kinds of things that were in those. People really did appreciate getting those. So again, I know a lot of people did a lot of hard work to get that all put together, and I wanted to thank them all. And then I just wanted to mention Councilmember Witkovich had pointed out or mentioned, I think our last regular council meeting, that she was going to participate in the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement online class. And I did, she was kind enough to share some of the links with me. So I did listen to their 1 hour webinar on that. And I'm doing a lot of research on what possibilities are out there, different kinds of community and police involvement. And wanted to thank her for that. And we're still working on it. We're not this is not something that we have forgotten about. So just wanted to remind everyone of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Duran-Mullica.
Hi. So I actually don't have much of an update. We did have a NADA meeting, but to be honest with you, I don't remember if that was before or after our last meeting. So I'm just going to do a brief update, just in case I did do this before, because I don't actually remember if I did do this update. So our last NADA meeting was great. We Smart Commute has a couple of great videos that are out that I could share with the team about, summer bike to work challenge, tips for riding transit, especially during this period of time, and then tips for improving air quality. Those were some new videos that they kicked out there. Also, of course, we've all heard that the N-Mine is scheduled to open on September 21st. So one of the things that I'm still trying to get more information on is if we're going to have a period of time where fares are going to be waived. So if you guys remember when they opened the G line, they had 2 weeks free for 2 years delay. So I asked if we could have the same. So I have the RTD director getting back to me on that, but we'll see. So that's still out there. And then other than that, the RTD Accountability Committee, the governor is supposed to be making his appointments this week to that. And then afterwards, we should hear about any additional appointments. There is going to be somebody from the north who's going to be appointed. And so we'll see who that is. Other than that, that's all I got. The grab and goes were amazing, and I really appreciate all the work that was around that. I think a lot of people came out and enjoyed themselves. So good work. Thanks.
Thank you. I will unmute you. Councilmember Escobar.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really have a whole lot. I do want to show my appreciation to staff for put on a great cool car parade. A lot of good comments came out of that. I appreciate that. If you haven't been down Melody Drive, it's a brand new street and a lot of bicycle traffic, and the neighbors are excited about it. It looks great with one exception, and we're getting some puddling in areas. And I understand that the engineers are going to take a look at that. So trying to keep my constituents at bay and say, we're looking at it. We'll get back to you. But there is some puddling occurring. Other than that, it's beautiful. And if you haven't been down Melody Drive, you ought to come down. It's a great improvement. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to start with echoing Councilmember Escobar. I drove down Melody Drive today and was just so excited to see the improvements there. That project has truly been years in the making. And I just want to say a huge thanks to staff for all of your work, and to council, this council as well as past council, for your action and your commitment to hearing residents and taking and making a statement that we do care about taking care of our roads and being responsive. Outside of that, I just have two really brief updates. First, on our consent agenda is the Colorado Communities for Climate Action Policy statement. I believe once that has been approved by this body, we'll let CC4CA know, and just know that we are just one of 34 member jurisdictions who are also ratifying the policy statement over the course of this month, so that we have something in place for the following year. And if there are any adjustments that need to be made, if there's anybody who, any jurisdiction that does not approve the policy statement, we'll certainly bring that back for discussion to all of you. But my expectation is that it'll be smooth sailing. And then finally, last week I participated in the Rocky Mountain Cradle to Career Communities Community Leaders Council meeting. This is a meeting that's held quarterly, and unfortunately, because of COVID, we haven't met this year. So this was a good opportunity to hear all about the great work that the organization is doing. Many of you may remember them formerly as Adams County Youth Initiative, but with the inclusion of the city and county of Broomfield, they've updated their name and their brand as well as their reach. And the primary purpose of our meeting was to discuss a broadened focus of shared work towards economic vitality in 4 key community level areas around community well-being, mental health and mental health, education and training, as well as economics in the workforce. Our next meeting will be in October, and I hope to share more about each of those different areas at that time. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. I had a couple of things that I won't go into detail on the repetitive one. So another food truck event, awesome. That was really great. Little shout out to my driver, Joe Gonzalez, in the Cool Car Cruise, only because he let me drive it for a little bit. But classic cars don't always have power steering, so I did not have the arm strength to turn successfully, so I did not drive the whole time. But that was a treat. And as we went through the city and stopped in different places to regroup, we had an opportunity to just get out and talk to residents, to talk to the drivers of these cars, but really just to talk to residents that came out. And it was a nice thing. We did hear a lot that this should be a new tradition. This should be something that we do. Please do this again. Especially those residents where we drove right in front of their house. They were like, oh, do this all the time. This is so great. So it was very fun. It was a good time. I also participated virtually with City Manager Geyer in the swearing in of 4 new officers. So I wanted to welcome, and hopefully I don't butcher their last names, Officer Bryce Berube, Officer Alexandra Hagstad, Officer Dominic Martinez, and Officer John Perry. So it was the first virtual swearing in ceremony to maintain social distance. Very few people were allowed in the community room, but it was beautifully done for a first try. And we just want to welcome our new members. I know there were a couple of people that did it on another day, but I just wanted to thank our construction team and Amanda Peterson. Councilmember Witkovich and I got a tour of the rec center, and that was fun. It was so awesome to see the progress that they've made, the work that they've done. We got to walk through the floor plan and see where everything's going to go, and it was really exciting. It's hard not to be inspired. 2 additional things: the Adams County mayors meet monthly with our RTD representatives, and we met on Friday and talked about the opening. And so I'd love to just kind of hear ideas from staff about what our what our ribbon cutting is going to look like, because they did mention, with social distancing and the COVID situation, that it won't get to look like some of the other ones that have taken place in recent years. And so I would love us to be creative about how we could still make it pretty cool, because I know our residents are real excited, and I certainly am. And then the other kind of exciting thing, if that's the right word, was the Tri-County Health mask order. And so that was the topic of the Metro Mayor's Caucus this week. We talked a lot about Tri-County's decision, regional decisions, different cities that have more of a mask order in place. I know Jefferson County Health is meeting soon. So there was just a lot of discussion about what does that mean for residents? What does the data look like? How can that actually support us, maintaining and not seeing a spike that some other states are seeing? So that was a hot topic at our Metro Mayor's meeting. So that is all I have. How about Joanna? Do you have anything tonight?
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Corey?
Good evening. I do not have anything tonight, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And City Manager Geyer?
Thank you, Mayor. A special shout out to Jason, Amanda, and Rupa for all their work in keeping things moving forward, responding to citizen requests while I was out of the office for several days last week, getting some R&R. So I'm back, catching up on emails. I'll almost caught up, probably need tomorrow and Wednesday, and then I'll be through all the emails that I had in my inbox. For July 27th, we're going to schedule a special study session at 6 p.m. to go over CARES Act funding community investment update. So just a heads up on that. I believe that was a request from a council member, but I don't recall who requested that. So we'll get that scheduled. And we'll also find a time to bring forward ideas about the RTD N-line opening that was mentioned by Mayor Leidy. And we are going to be talking about fireworks later on in tonight's meeting. I do want to give a shout out to the police department, neighborhood services code staff, animal control officers, all of the individuals that helped work 4th of July festivities, starting in the early hours of the morning with a cool car parade, cool car cruise rather, and then all the way into the early morning hours of July 5th, responding to firework complaints. I know there's different perspectives, and we'll dive into that discussion later on in tonight's meeting, but that was a really significant lift. I'm really proud of staff and the work that they did this year around that, and I think the data shows that. So those are all the updates I have tonight.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving into the financial report with our Director of Finance, Jason Loveland. Jason, do you have a presentation you'd like me to project?
No presentation, but you could pull up the memo and kind of scroll through that.
Okay.
Start on page 2, if you don't mind.
I will do it. Let me get to share. Ta-da! Okay. Oh, page 2. Here we go.
I know it takes a second to get there. So this is our May finance report. I'll skip over the taxes. I'm going to jump into those when I get done going over the financials to provide an update on that. Total, you can see total revenues in the general fund are down 4.7%, largely attributable to taxes. We've been talking about that quite often. One line, the intergovernmental revenues line, is up 43%. The reason for that is that's where we're capturing the CARES money, and we've earned, if you will, $380,000 of that through May. And then, let's see. I guess another highlight in the other tax column, I am going to circle back up to taxes, I guess. You'll see that one line is down 70%. So that includes our audit revenue and accommodations tax. You're aware that the Ramada is closed, so there hasn't been tax being remitted there. And then, given the pandemic, our audit efforts are a little lesser than they were in the previous year, for good reason. But that kind of captures a big number up there as far as the percentage of 70% being down. And then the next page, general fund expenditures. You'll see those expenditures are up about 8%. Again, partially attributable to the CARES Act grant funding that we've done in other pandemic related expenditures. One large piece, planning and development, those capture safe built fees for plan reviews and whatnot. Those are up $178,000 just for that one item. A lot of that is attributable to our own work for the rec center project. You'll see police up over 10%, $276,000 of that is related to personnel expenditures. Not increase in expenses, but just having staff on board in that line item. Going to the water fund on the next page, you'll see total revenues up 3%. Water use consumption is up 3.3% on the year, which drives that first line of water charges being up a little over 5%. Overall, good shape as far as the revenues and expenditures within that fund. And then next, the wastewater fund. Wastewater charges up about 5.5% on the year. No major outliers of operating expenditures or capital to report. We have some big projects going on, but we'll see that throughout the year and next year as well. Then in the stormwater fund, total revenues down 5%. A lot of that's timing of the charges. There's been no change in those fees. And then you can see the operating expenditures of $37,000. And then last, the sanitation fund. Revenues are down about 3%. The biggest part of that is from the prior year. We had a grant for $19,900, which we're not reporting this year. But otherwise, trash charges flat, basically at down 1%, and then recycling and polycart revenue kind of hanging in there. They're small numbers, but on a percentage basis, they kind of stick out, specifically the polycarts. Total expenditures of $540,000 in that fund. And again, nothing terribly exciting to report for our enterprise funds, which is good news because we have plenty to report on the general fund. So that was just a quick May update. And I had done an update already on, but so the May financials are reporting April sales tax numbers. So we do have May sales tax numbers, and I'm going to provide that information now rather than coming back at another meeting to give an update. Since we have it, we don't need to wait a week or two. So on that front, sales and use tax for May was down 12.9%. April was down 25%. So we made significant strides as far as getting reacclimated to businesses opening and just consumer confidence and getting back out to do shopping and spending. So down 12.9% isn't fantastic, but it's better than it was in April, and kind of a positive outlook for what happened in May. Specifically, sales tax was down 7.5%. The biggest drop was auto use tax. So that's people in North Glen making vehicle purchases. That was down 56%. from May 2019. And that auto use tax takes us back to about 2009, 2010 levels in that month. So definitely an impact there on vehicle sales within the city. And then food tax, which has been a top performer, continued to do so. In April, it was up 7%, and then in May, it was up just under 11%. So positive information from the food tax. And then our marijuana tax is up 8% on the year through the May collections. When we look at, if we go back, clear back to like April 20th, when we first talked about the impacts that we were going to see, kind of presented a low, medium, and high impact cases. Right now we're sitting, a new updated forecast shows that we'll probably be right about the medium impact level. Our first stat at things through April sales tax, we were kind of right in the middle between medium and high impact on the general fund as far as sales tax. Right now, I'd say that we're right on track to be at the mid-level of what we had forecast in April before we had any information, really. That's good news. That's not great news. I mean, that means that we'll be down somewhere between 10 and 12% revenue for the year. But as we keep moving on, we'll keep making updates and continue to provide feedback. We'll be back in either probably early August to present the 2021 proposed budget. And so we're making modifications daily to revenue forecasts. So more to come on that, but wanted to provide this information as the most up-to-date tonight at our meeting.
So Jason, I wasn't sure if all that information you just shared, if there were slides to go with that?
There were not slides for that.
Okay, just checking. I was looking and I thought, I don't see them, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Jason? No? Okay. Oh, Councilmember Malika.
So I have a question, but it's not for Jason. Sorry, Jason. It's actually for Heather. So as I was looking through there, I like how they break them out by areas. So like the marketplace. A question that I did have is that work still going forward with the movie theater? Because I'm curious how that's going, the timeline of that is going to be affected by COVID-19 and whether or not that's going to be stalled because they don't know when they'll open. I don't know. Just curious.
It's a great question, and certainly I haven't touched base with Debbie this week, but so I'll check in with her tomorrow when I have a chance to talk with her. But all signs have pointed towards they're moving forward with the project, and so I'll get council more of an update. But I know the last time I talked with Debbie, it was a couple of weeks ago, and they're moving forward with it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Any other questions about the financial report? No? Okay, well, thank you, Jason. Moving into the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I'll close that vote and the consent agenda passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, we have 3 public hearings tonight, so we will begin with CB 1945. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A bill for an ordinance adopting by reference as a primary code the Model Traffic Code for Colorado 2020 edition by repealing and reenacting sections 7-1-1 through 7-1-7 and 7-1-13 of the North Glen Municipal Code.
Thanks. I will now open the public hearing on CB 1945. Joanna, were there any comments received prior to the meeting, or is there anyone who has signed up to speak on this?
There were no comments received prior to the meeting, and I will unmute the callers just in case they would like to provide testimony during the public hearings.
Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak either for or against CB 1945? No? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The next one, CB 1947. Joanna, will you read the title?
A bill for an ordinance repealing section 10-5-5 subsection M of the North Glen Municipal Code to restore the original language of the International Fire Code 2009 edition.
I will now open the public hearing on CB 1947. Do we have anybody that has signed up to speak on this?
Nobody has signed up to speak in advance of the meeting.
Okay. Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak either for or against CB 1947? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The third public hearing tonight, CB 1948. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A bill for a special ordinance amending the 2020 budget, recognizing revenues and appropriating expenditures by supplemental appropriation for the payment of the costs and expenses of the municipal government agencies and offices of the City of North Glen, Colorado for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2020.
I will now open the public hearing on CB 1948. Joanna, did we have any comments prior to the meeting?
No comments were received prior to the meeting.
Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak either for or against CB 1948? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Moving into ordinances on second reading, CB 1945. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A bill for an ordinance adopting by reference as a primary code the Model Traffic Code for Colorado 2020 edition by repealing and reenacting section 7-1-1 through 7-1-7 and 7-1-13 of the North Glen Municipal Code.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, Police Chief May is here to provide a summary of the item. Welcome tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. What this does, this 2020 Model Traffic Code replaces our 2010. It does all the updates. It also removes certain ordinances, sections within the Model Traffic Code that doesn't really apply to North Glen, especially when it comes to driving on mountain roads and some other things. So again, it's just good practice. Make sure we keep our Model Traffic Code updated, so there's not too many things that are hanging out there that haven't been for addendum and everything else attached to it. So we got it all squared away for the 2020 Model Traffic Code. We're looking for approval.
Okay, any questions? Any discussion tonight? Okay, Joanna, please call the vote.
Mayor Leidy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford?
Yes.
Councilmember Witkovich?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CB 1945 on second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, CB 1947. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A bill for an ordinance repealing section 10-5-5, subsection M of the North Glen Municipal Code to restore the original language of the International Fire Code 2009 edition.
Move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. We have Brooke, our Director of Planning and Development, here to provide a summary. Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll keep this brief. The bill before you tonight was brought forward at the request of the fire district. And in essence, the fees have not been raised since 2011 when we adopted the 09 International Fire Codes. What you have in your packet is attachment 1 and attachment 2. Essentially, we are reverting back to the original language, which will enable the fire district to establish their fees. And that is the end of my presentation.
Well done. Thank you. Any discussion or questions for Brooke? No? Okay. Joanna, please call the vote.
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CB 1947 on second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, CB 1948. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A bill for a special ordinance amending the 2020 budget, recognizing revenues and appropriating expenditures by supplemental appropriation for the payment of the costs and expenses of the municipal government, agencies, and offices of the City of North Glen, Colorado for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2020.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. We have Jason back with us again, Director of Finance, will provide a summary.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, to capture revenues and expenditures to make an amendment to the 2020 budget, we'll capture 3 specific grants: the CARES Act funding grant, distribution from Adams County, a COVID-19 grant award received by the police department for COVID-related expenditures, our CDBG carryover from 2019, water rights acquisition increase to that budget of $200,000, and then lastly, Bunker Hill Lift Station shared project with the developer, which you'll be taking action on later, or maybe we already have actually. So those are the 5 items that are included in the supplemental.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Jason or discussion tonight? Okay, Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CB 1948 on second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving into ordinances on first reading, CB 1949. Joanna, will you read the title?
A bill for an ordinance amending section 11-3-6, parent P, parent 2 of the North Glen Municipal Code addressing distance limitations from oil and gas well sites to city facilities.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, Brooke is with us again to provide a summary of this item.
I'm going to try to break my last time record here for presentation. This was a request that was made by council bringing forward to add municipal or public facilities to the requirement of within 1,000 feet that they would need to request a waiver. Otherwise, it would not be allowed for a oil well permit.
Any questions or discussion for Brooke on this one? Okay. Thank you very much. Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Witkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Mullica,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CB 1949 on first reading passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, we have 4 resolutions tonight. The first one is CR 100. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution approving a First Amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of North Glen and Adams 12 5-star schools for use and access of city-owned property.
Move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. So we have Amanda Peterson, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services, to provide a summary tonight. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. In June of 2018, Adams 12 5-star schools was granted use of the property to the west of the Justice Center to use as a staging area for their fiber optic connectivity improvements. As a part of that project, the district did also provide or is providing the city with some additional and improved connectivity between our facilities. They had originally intended to be finished with that project in April, but is taking a little longer than they originally planned and are requesting an extension of that original MOU through September of this year. We do have Perry Movick with Adams 12 on the line to answer any questions that are specific to the district. Otherwise, I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just ask a quick question. Are the delays primarily, maybe they can't answer it, primarily due to COVID-19 effects, or was there something else that was unexpected, or costs or something that had led to this need for an extension?
I would ask if Perry Movick can please respond to that. I think he's been unmuted.
I think so too. Thanks, Amanda. And thanks, Mayor and Council, for inviting me to attend tonight. So the delays were really sort of twofold. One was just it's taken longer to get permits in some of the jurisdictions where the district is located. And actually, North Glen is not one of those. You guys were very gracious and helped us out with that. The other piece is COVID related. As we got into dealing with COVID-19, our contractor asked if they could slow production from 5 days a week to 4, just to provide more space between their crews and time that their crews would be apart. And we felt that was a reasonable request, so we extended the construction period for them for that reason.
Thank you. Any other questions about this item? Okay, well, thanks for being here. Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Witkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Mullica,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CR 100 passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, resolution CR 101. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution approving the second amendment to the development agreement between the City of North Glen, Carl's Farm Investors Incorporated, and Carl's Farm Metropolitan District Number 2 for Carl's Farm Filing Number 1, Amended Number 1, Final Plat, Public Infrastructure Improvements.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, Brooke is back. No need to rush.
This one may take a few minutes just to walk everybody through the understanding of what we're trying to accomplish tonight. This is an amendment to the development agreement for the Metro District. The Metro District is intended to finance and build the trunk infrastructure to serve all of the future phases of development. Under the original terms of the agreement, it was contemplated that the two residential developers were going to go simultaneously, and therefore the original scope of work for the development agreement was based on both projects moving forward at the same time. This has two implications. One of which is that in order for both of those developers to have public infrastructure, the Metro District would have to provide it. The second is that the Metro District was relying on those developers developing at the same time in order to have the valuation necessary in order to finance all of that public infrastructure through the district. What is now happening is that one of the two developers is actually going to be coming in after the other developer, likely sometime later this year or first quarter of next year. But both developers are still involved. Residential developers are still involved with this project. The other aspect to this development agreement is that the multifamily development is now catching up to the first phase. And so what this agreement is intended to contemplate is addressing the phased infrastructure for the residential as well as for the multifamily. And so in essence, there's a slightly lesser amount of public infrastructure contemplated here from the Metro District, but this will enable them to be able to go and sell the bonds that they would otherwise be building for the future phase of development.
Okay. Somebody's microwave's going crazy. Does anyone have any questions for Brooke or discussion on this item? No? Okay. Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yes.
Councilmember Downing.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Goff.
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika.
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I'll close that vote, and CR 101 passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. And just one quick note, we are hoping that by the middle of this week that the residential developers will be closing on the property, which is good news, and this was integral to that decision.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, next one, CR 103. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution approving a contract between the City of North Glen and J.R. Philonk Construction Company Incorporated for the Lift Station A replacement project.
Move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. So Kent Kisselman, Director of Public Works, is here and will provide a summary. Good evening, Kent.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Yes, this item and the next item are similar. They're both for the lift station and the force main. This first item is specifically for the lift station itself. We had 4 contractors bid on our project. One was Philonk, BT Construction, Moltz, who did the headworks in 2018, and a firm called Reynolds. And after reviewing all the information and going through their documents and who could do the best work for us, for the lift station, we decided it was best that we split it up into 2 separate contracts, one for the lift station and one for the force main. So FELONC is actually, their specialty is lift stations, and they're actually a national firm, but they have a firm in Northglenn. So that's also, a great reason. They did work for us on the water treatment plant back in 2011 or 12, I believe, and they did good work there as well. So this is the first part where they come on as a contractor, and they're going to work with our design engineer to help develop that guaranteed maximum price. In your packet, you can see the 30%, kind of guess of where they think the project will come in at. That's certainly going to change as we continue to develop the plans and get them on board. We hope that it stays, similar, but we don't want to hold to that number, but it's a good starting number. So attached to this memorandum is a resolution that, if approved, would authorize the mayor to execute a contract between the City of Northglenn and J.R. FELONC Construction Company for the lift station A replacement project in the amount not to exceed $34,935. And I'll answer any questions you have.
Okay, any questions for Kent? City Manager Guyer?
Mayor Lady, I would like Jason Loveland, our finance director, just to talk about the bonding component related to both of these projects, so you understand where the project funding is going to be coming from.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you. So these projects will be financed through the issuance of wastewater revenue bonds. So our plan for that is in August, we'll submit a request for proposal to get somebody on board as part of our team to help us negotiate and navigate through the financing of this project and the next that you're going to speak about. So the lift station and force main. We'll go through that process of issuing the revenue bonds. That will take probably 60 to 90 days from once we get everyone on board. I think the tentative schedule from the engineering group is that they'll have a guaranteed maximum price by the end of November. Once we have that guaranteed maximum price, we'll go to the market and actually sell the bonds. This has been part of our strategy and study that we did starting in 2017, where we had adopted a rate schedule to move us forward to be able to fund and finance this project. So that's kind of where we're at on the financing side of things. We'll be supported by wastewater revenue bonds late in the year, probably first couple of weeks of December. So.
Okay, any questions? Councilmember Brown?
Jason, so are these the same kind of bonds like what we did for the police department and the civic center, just different type of bonding, meaning wastewater? Is there any effect on the economy right now? Could there be anything related to COVID that could keep us from getting the financing, or what do you see?
So I think in this case, we're going to have limited exposure. It's going to be supported through user charges and fees versus taxes. So there may be a slight financial impact, but right now in the market, they're not seeing any impact. People are paying their utility bills for the most part, even with payment plans being made available and late payments and things of that nature. But right now, the market is actually really good for municipal bonds right now, especially through utilities. So we're in pretty good shape. Our estimates that we made in 2017 as far as interest rates and then and some things like that are actually coming in better now as we continue to talk about historically low rates for pretty much all things. So anyway, long way to get there that I don't think that the COVID impact should negatively impact this financing.
Cool, thank you.
Any other? Oh, Councilmember Malika.
Quick question for Kent. And maybe I heard this wrong. Did you say that they had a shop here in Northland?
They do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for going local. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was very excited to have them bid on the project. And they're qualified, so that was the main thing.
Of course,
they're qualified and they've done work for us in the past, and we were very happy with that work. So
great. Well, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much. Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Mullica,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel.
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CR 103 passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. All right, CR 104. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution approving a contract between the City of North Glen and BT Construction Incorporated for the Force Main A replacement project.
Move for approval.
Second.
Great, Kent is still here. You want to give us a summary of this one?
Yes. So second part of this, and if I didn't mention the first time, Lift Station A is our main lift station in the city that takes, the majority of our flow, and that is located on Irma. This Force Main project will come from that station, Lift Station A, up Irma, down 120th, down Ray Street, which is part of Carl's Farm, and then tie back through our facility at the Maintenance and Operations building, which will replace the entire force main within the city of North Glen. Now, again, there's another 6 miles, but this replaces the actual forced portion of the main. So if you can imagine the line, it pumps uphill until you get to the maintenance and operations facility, and it crests at a point, and then it slopes and begins to gravity feed all the way to our lift station or to our wastewater station out in Weld County. So the deterioration on the pipe is more so on that forced part because it's always flowing full versus the gravity system that doesn't scour as much. And so we'll be taking a look at the assessment. And again, we are doing our wastewater treatment master plan upgrade this year, and that'll be a part of that as well. So for this, the force main portion of the project, we selected BT Construction, who is also a local firm, not local in North Glen, but local in the respect that they do work on our Stanley Lake pipeline, which we're a joint operator with the city of Thornton. They have done work for us in the past. So another good contractor who's going to be working on the force main. And having two contractors should be very beneficial to the city, where we can have both projects, almost going simultaneously, where we have, the work on the lift station and the work on the force main going at the same time by different contractors. So again, attached to this resolution is Council Resolution number 104, a resolution that, if approved, would authorize the mayor to execute a contract between the City of North Glen and BT Construction, Inc. for the Force Main A replacement project in an amount not to exceed $39,240. And I'll answer any more questions.
I don't see any questions. Thank you, Kent. Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Mullica,
Yes.
Councilmember Escabel,
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CR 104 passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving into our discussion items. The first one is an update on the 4th of July fireworks enforcement. And we have Police Commander Heidi Waltz with us to present information to council. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. How are you this evening?
Good.
I am here to obviously give you the update on our 4th of July fireworks campaign. Last time we met, we had talked about a few things, reference our strategies going into the 4th of July, including our education campaign, as well as the ordinance updates and how those would hopefully gain voluntary compliance throughout the community on our fireworks. We had a couple other variables that came into place. Obviously, COVID-19, we weren't sure how that was going to impact our responses and our efforts. And then there were some changes to some language in the law that we also needed to deal with. So as we went into the 4th of July, we basically had every single sworn officer working that we possibly could. I want to do a quick shout out though, because this was a very cooperative effort between all the city departments, including parks, streets, the recreation department, code enforcement, communications, and obviously North Metro Fire Rescue had a part in this as well. So the planning went very well, and a lot of effort between all those parts to get everything so that it was set up and hopefully the most fun, safe event that we could have. It began very early on the 4th, and several of you talked about participating in the Cool Car Cruise. I heard that event was great. A lot of participation throughout the community. The gift bags coming up to the cars, I think everything worked out. The officers provided a lot of traffic direction and safety for that to happen so that it was a very controlled event. And like you said, it sounded like everybody had a lot of fun on it. We also had officers in the park starting early in the morning just to make sure. We weren't sure what the turnout was going to be. Obviously, it was a traditional event for people to come to the park. We weren't sure if a lot of people were still going to come up and do a family event at the park, have their barbecues, spend the day out there. So we limited some access into it, but did not limit anybody coming into the park. We just wanted to make sure that we kept in with the governors and the Tri-County health orders, trying to limit large groups coming in and gathering. We also had officers that started on some fireworks enforcement early in the day. As soon as they finished with the Cool Car Cruise, they were assigned to fireworks enforcement as well as any of the officers at the park. If there was any fireworks going off, they were going to deal with that. The real fireworks enforcement team started around 2 o'clock, and then 3, 4, and 5 had different teams coming on throughout the day, and then they stayed till late in the night, till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. So throughout the day, we had a good majority of our officers working fireworks enforcement. Obviously, we also had our patrol teams, and so they were handling the primary just calls for service on the street. The fireworks enforcement teams, all they were really handling were fireworks enforcement calls. We ran into a new variable this year that was kind of interesting that we hadn't seen before. And as officers were doing things, we noticed that there were lookouts in different areas in which people would start whistling. They actually had physical whistles. They'd whistle if we came into an area. They were doing some cat calls, some things like that. So it was kind of a new variable that we hadn't seen before that we also were looking at. And then we had some other interesting things happen on the calls too that I'll get into here in just a minute. And Madam Mayor, if you wouldn't mind pulling up at the very end of the program, there's 2 slides.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind just pulling those out for me real quick.
Sure.
We're going into some things. So the first slide she's going to pull up here, and if you just want to leave it there for now, is a comparison of all the agencies around the area, but I'm going to get into our numbers first and then come back to these. We had 234 calls for service for just fireworks on the 4th of July. That is a 100% increase since last year. So we doubled the number of our fireworks calls from last year. The first call for fireworks, however, did not come in until 2:34 p.m. and the last one came in just before shy of 3 a.m. So it was really a 12-hour period that our fireworks calls were happening. Even more tying down is 218 of those calls actually came between the hours of 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. So a 7-hour period. And that averages out to basically 1 call coming in every 2 minutes on fireworks. It should be noted that AdCom that night took, in their 24-hour period, took in 2,640 calls between that 24-hour period. And between the hours of 9 and 11, a 2-hour period, they took 745 calls in at AdCom. That's basically one call every 16 seconds that they're answering, trying to get in. So the system was quite busy that night. There was a lot of calls coming in, and the officers were trying to get to everything they possibly could. Let me go into some more specific numbers for you real quick. 87 of those calls, there was no RP attached to it, meaning that the person either didn't want to leave their name or didn't give a name. We were still able to get 5 summonses off those calls by going into the area and finding that, even though we didn't have an RP on it. 64 of the calls for services did have an RP, but a lot of those also did not have specific information. So they would say it was somewhere down the street, it was somewhere down by the corner, it's in the apartment complex. So the officers went into those areas trying to find those things and were able to get 8 summonses off those calls. 10 more calls did have RPs wanting contact. We ended up with 3 reports off of that, and the other 7 were either gone on arrival or unable to locate on arrival. The big thing I think we should note here, though, is I had 71 calls for service that were initiated by the police officers themselves. So they came in an area, they were able to see or hear something, they tracked it down if they could. They tried to on most of them, and out of those 71 calls, they actually wrote 48 summonses. So when you look at that, that's a lot of calls for service, and then also a lot of citations. So on that slide, you'll see that we actually had 61 citations that evening. Overall, again, we had a total of 234 calls for service for just fireworks. It should be noted that we had 358 calls for service overall that night. So 234 of our 358 calls were for fireworks. When you look at the numbers there on the screen, you'll see that a comparison with the agencies surrounding us. And again, some of these agencies are bigger than us. We still did 61 citations compared to some of our neighbors, including some that had 1, 2, or 0 citations. So our enforcement actions and our officers really went out there, tried to take care of as many calls as they possibly could, tried to find as many of those fireworks as they could, and enforced where they were able to. So a lot of numbers there. If you just go to the next slide real quick and click on it, I want to give you guys just a perspective of kind of what it looked like. And maybe some of you have seen this video, but this is Channel 4's, and hopefully it'll come up here. This is Channel, yep, nope, just leave it there for a second. There it is. Channel 4's copter around the evening was going around and watching the fireworks. And so when you look at this, these are all personal fireworks that people are going off. These are not professional shows, but if you see how quickly they're going off, they were very difficult from our perspective, actually trying to track down exactly where those fireworks were coming from. So it's just a quick, easy visual of what was going on that night. And if you ask any of the agencies around us, this was an unprecedented night compared to other nights that we've had. And again, our calls doubled from last year compared to the others. So if you want to go back to that other slide real quick, if you can, Madam Mayor, that'd be great.
Yeah, it takes me a minute.
That's fine. Again, we really focused on trying to get out there and handle the calls. I know there were some complaints, obviously, but when you look at the number of calls and the number of fireworks that were going off, we got to, I would say, as many as we possibly could. The thing that we also need to understand, though, that this year was different than future years are going to be. With COVID, we obviously didn't have some of the events that we normally would. And when that would happen in the years coming up, that's going to obviously divide some of our resources off to those things as opposed to being able to do fireworks enforcement. This year, I was able to put as many officers as I could specifically on fireworks enforcement when it occurred. There's just been a lot of things going on with that. Next year, I hope we get to do the cool car cruise again. So that's one more event on top of everything else that's going to be happening. And so we just need to make sure that we're doing the coverage on the street. We're able to provide for any large groups, the safety and security concerns there. It should be noted, you know, with all these strategies, the big thing we were trying to do is get voluntary compliance. And when we didn't get voluntary compliance, we tried to enforce, but people were still willing to, with the ordinance and with the fines, shoot off the fireworks and take whatever chances they were going to have to do that activity. I'm not sure what more we could really do than what we did this year. And again, this year will be different than years coming. So we're trying to figure out the best way to balance how to provide the best customer service we can with actually dealing with the specific problem we're looking at. So, and I do believe the chief has something he'd also like to throw in there.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Again, this was with not, fireworks being canceled all over the metro. I hope this was an anomaly this year of the amount of fireworks that occurred on, by our residents. But again, we did a lot of education. We did a lot of enforcement. We put a lot of signs out there. And with all that information, they still decided to set off the fireworks. Very difficult. I guess we just have to look and see how we're going to focus those energies next year and our resources. So what we did this year is we looked at locations and put certain amount of teams in those locations. And then, and again, it showed that we did end up writing 61 tickets. But I think one of the things that we really need to look at next year is the ones that are really affected by the fireworks, and maybe try to educate them, because we're not going to win this war on fireworks. It's going to take several years, I believe, of enforcement to make sure when those fines start going out and people stop doing it. But I'm hoping, once the fireworks shows start continuing in the next years to come, that will reduce a lot of the personal fireworks that people shut off at their house. The other thing too is during the enforcement, I recommend that if you guys can, next year for the 4th of July, if you want to see something, it's our busiest night of the year, come out and ride with officers, and you'll get to see firsthand of what went on. I can tell you this year, tensions were high. We go in, we started issuing summonses. Officers were, there was actually even some racial slurs against some of my officers of color, which is very unfortunate. But they took a lot of abuse verbally, but they went out there and they did their jobs like they were, that they were told to do. They followed the orders of going out and trying to catch and educate as many fireworks violators as they could. Again, Heidi mentioned that we were coming into neighborhoods and they had whistles they would blow to let people know that officers would drive up the road and there would be abandoned fireworks in the roadway. So again, we were out there. I know you guys took a lot of phone calls and complaints that we weren't, but I can tell you we were. And they even said, my officers, like they never have seen such a haze over our city. It looked like there was a huge forest fire and just that smoke just laid in, and for hours. And you guys probably witnessed that outside your homes as well. So again, this was probably the best enforcement teams we could do, because next year we're going to hopefully get our 4th of July events up and running, during the day, but that's going to take resources from us. So we have to be creative on how we deal with this next year. And again, maybe focus in on some of the victims and the complainants on this, see if we can help them, educate them so they can prepare for this night. Next year, 4th of July is on a Sunday. So we're going to have to deal with the probably, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday next year, since Monday will be probably a holiday for most people. So again, we're going to do our best putting teams in those districts, but we're not going to have as many teams as we did this year. And again, it was overwhelming, the amount of fireworks that were going off. And you guys heard it sound like a war zone out there. So that's all I have. I wish we had better news on how we could fix this problem, but it's going to take a while for some of those fines and everything else to kick in. But it's going to take several years probably for them to, start realizing that those high fines aren't worth it.
Thank you. So we have quite a few questions. So in order of appearance, I have Councilmember Mullica, and then Goff, and then Peterson, and then Brown right now. So Councilmember Mullica.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I have to just say that when I saw the slide of comparing our work with the work of other cities when it came to enforcement. I mean, it's pretty amazing that our city was able to respond to this level. When you look at some of the larger cities who have larger forces who weren't really able to, or whatever reasons, didn't write as many citations. So I think that speaks, volumes of saying how much our police department did the best that they could in this enforcement. One of the questions I do have is can you explain the process now? So we issued 61 citations. There's lots of residents who want to know what happens next to those people. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty about what happens next with these citations. So if you could explain what that process is moving forward, I think that could be helpful for some.
Well, I can tell you, I didn't make the courts happy because it's all, they're going to all respond to court on the same day. So they're going to send out some letters that makes adjustment. But it's not just the 61 we wrote on July 4th. We ended up writing, I think we're up to 85 summonses, and we're continuing to get fireworks complaints still. So we will continue to issue those summonses. So what's next is they have a court date of August 25th throughout the day, and they will come in and see the judge, and then the judge will make the determination. If the citation is good, they will end up being fined with that mandatory $1,000 fine. I'm unaware if any have been cited twice, so I haven't heard of any repeat offenders. Again, because that fee will go up if they are charged for a second time. So, so we're just waiting for the court date. But it's again, that'll be August 25th when that occurs.
Okay, thank you for walking that through. I think that there are just some people who wanted to know, how these cases move forward, and then also there was one individual who was very concerned that they wouldn't be fined appropriately. So I just wanted them to know that, those are the next steps and they'll be seeing the judge soon. So, all right, those are all the questions I have. Thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Chief May kind of answered the question before I even asked it, but I do want to just tell people again, or anybody who might be watching this, remind people, if they got a summons and the judge determined they had to pay the fee this year, and noticed in their notes there was somebody who had said, well, I don't care, I'll just pay the fee and do it again next year. Well, next year it would be a higher fee. And, it's not like they could start from a clean slate next year. So this will continue, the fees will continue to increase until hopefully people will learn their lesson. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, Chief and Commander. Any chance you can go back to slide 5 of 6 of the PowerPoint with the statistics, please?
Sure. This one?
Further down, there we go, that one.
Okay.
When you take a look at this, I think these numbers are really important. I had many people ask specifically, how many citations were issued. And so it's good to know that 61 on the 4th and 84 overall on the weekend. And if you look at those numbers, even though it really was a war zone, it was like, no fireworks I've ever seen in my life in my neighborhood. Looks like those are, tell me if I'm missing something, is that basically 1 out of 4 people that called in? Of the 4 complaints, there's almost a 25% citation rate.
I hope you're not making me mad. But yeah, it's a good rate.
No, I didn't hear what you said. I hope I'm not making you what?
Yeah, well, I hope you're not making me do math tonight.
Oh, I thought you said, I hope I'm not making you mad.
No,
I think, and that's my point. I concur. I think that's a very high rate, right, of citation considering all the things that were happening. So I have 2 points on that. How much are your, and stick here, actually, where we have this slide up, can you opine why Brighton and Broomfield were so much lower for both calls and citations. And I mean, my first, dumb guess is because I think, didn't Brighton have a show?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, Heidi actually talked to both those jurisdictions. So I'm going to tell you, but I want to say something about Heidi. She put together a great game plan. And I'm super proud of, again, how well that went off. And to all my officers that went out there and worked so hard that night. Again, they even taking some of that verbal stuff, from people, they still just acted incredibly professional. I'm super proud of them. So I just wanted to say that. And council, thank you so much. Because again, I mean, by starting with the new ordinance, moving in with Diana and Renee and everybody in that, doing the marketing of hey, getting the word out there about the legal fireworks. Again, I just hope with everybody being pent up and no fireworks shows, that this is an anomaly this year of how many fireworks went off. So I hope next year is much better, and I hope people really look at their neighbors and say, hey, we had some neighbors in distress, and that's not how we, during these times, we need to come together and not just disobey something that's causing others distress. So that's all I have to say about that. But I'm going to turn it over to Heidi to answer your question.
So reference Broomfield, just to let you know, that number is 183% increase from their calls for service last year. So they really went up on their numbers, but they also did not have a zero tolerance policy this year. So they did a lot of education and warnings on that. So that's probably why they only had the summonses that they did. As for Brighton, they actually have some legal fireworks that are different than ours. So they do allow fountains and some other things. But when I talked with the commander out there, he wasn't sure why they only had one summons. So he was not pleased necessarily with that number. But that's probably also why they had lesser calls for service, because they did have their own show, first of all. And then second of all, they do allow some fireworks that we do not.
Okay. Thank you. And then how did you do a little division of labor? Was the bulk of the officers working that night? Were they responding to the calls, or was there a certain percentage that was then allocated for strictly patrol? Or because of the high number of calls and the intensity of the fireworks, if you had that, was that just maybe not botched, but scrubbed because there was much demand for responding to the fireworks?
No, my patrol teams pretty much, I kept my patrol teams in place. So I left my normal staffing for my patrol teams to handle those calls. And if you notice in the packet I sent out, I listed what we had for calls for service that night. We had several priority calls, etc. So those teams pretty much were able to focus on their primary function of responding to the other calls. However, a couple of them were able to pick up fireworks summonses as well. My fireworks teams, though, however, I focused on some of the areas that we had high complaints last year. So I actually had teams dedicated in Fox Run, which was one of our highest complaint areas last year. So there were 2 teams that were dedicated to try to stay in that area most of the night. Now, I will let you know, they ended up having to go out of that area somewhat. And then in the rest of the wards, I had one team in 3-4. And then I had another 2 teams in 2 throughout the night. And so I had specific teams in those areas trying to make sure that they stayed in those areas so they were quicker to respond to any of those calls that came in.
Thank you. And I would like, if not now, and probably not now, but maybe as we get closer to summer next year, I would love your and Chief's thoughts in terms of just, is this type of enforcement worth it? And I think it is, personally, but I want to make sure that we're not putting you in an untenable position to, be able to try to stop a problem that is very much like a flood. I've had residents indicate that they'd be happy to, like, if there's some sort of, committee on how to do this, people are asking to look outside the box. And one of them is even like, is it worth it to enforce this ban? And I think it is. But as we move forward, I'd love to hear, especially law enforcement's views on the best way of doing this, so we're not putting you guys in situations that's setting the residents up to be unhappy and you guys in a position that you shouldn't have to be in.
Well, and I think
down the road.
Yeah, and again, next year's probably going to look a little different because I won't be able to throw as many resources as I did this year to strictly fireworks enforcement in those areas because we'll have to split those up into some other functions as well. But the one thing I do want people to realize is when you look at those numbers, again, a majority of the citations we were able to do is because the officers were able to actually self-initiate the activity. So when we had people calling in, they weren't able to give us enough specific information to actually track down where it was. But the officers, because they were in those areas, were seeing the fireworks, were able to track them down. And then those were the ones that were able to write the summons on because then they had everything from start to end on their piece. So again, when we're looking at that, I know people want to call in. I know people want to be able to put those complaints in and things like that. But we found that those actually, again, they weren't able to give us enough information to actually get us to the point where we can issue a summons. So that would be something I would say that we need to look at next year on how we deal with that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have Councilmember Brown and then Councilmember Escabel next.
I was just wondering, do we have a breakout by ward yet for the summons?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact, for you. So sorry, I didn't have that earlier. So
you're okay.
In Ward 1, there were 67 calls for service that ended up in 13 citations. Ward 2, there were 72 calls for service that ended up in 28 citations. Ward 3 had 63 calls for service and ended up in 13 citations. Ward 4 had 30 calls for service and 7 citations. And then I had several blank addresses that were general areas, so I'm not exactly sure what ward they are.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I was kind of curious because I know what I had in Ward 2 last year and wondering when you said there were 2 groups there, I knew it was bad. I got a lot of calls. But thank you very much, and thank you for your diligent work with your team.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Escabel.
Thank you, Mayor. Kudos to our police department. They did a great job in enforcing what they could enforce. So I'd like to, for picking up what Councilmember Peterson mentioned about next year, need to look at what went well and what didn't go well. I personally was on the phone for 9 minutes waiting to make my complaint. And I used the non-emergency number. It was still 9 minutes before they got to me. I had people call me and tell me they'd been on the phone and gave up. So it has to be a better way to communicate what's going on in the neighborhood so that if nothing else, I don't know how much better we could have done in terms of citations or contacts. And if people don't want to get involved, I understand, your neighbor's your neighbor and, he just wants you to look the other way. But we need to look at a better way to address that. Shouldn't take 9 minutes to make a complaint. I realize it's not a 911 emergency call. And I made that clear at the beginning. But it still shouldn't take 9 minutes for them to say where, what's the location?
Well,
so after that, maybe we could do something better with that. I don't understand. I really don't understand the amount of calls that I got, the frustration people had about why we weren't doing anything about it. We need to have a better mechanism of communicating with the community. Let them know exactly how many next year in May, in June. Let them know exactly how many calls of service there were. What's the effect to the community? What's it costing us for you to behave? And maybe the $1,000 fine. I said earlier when we agreed on that I wasn't in a punitive mode, but maybe if you can afford $1,000, maybe we should go back to $3,500. See how much of that you can afford. The main thing that I think that concerned the residents that I spoke to is the disrespect and the disobedience. That they just were not willing to consider that, we have Vietnam vets, we have probably a couple of World War II vets. We have Iraq. We have Desert Shield. We have Desert Storm. We have Afghanistan. I mean, it does a tremendous amount of damage to our veterans and to our animal owners. It's you know, I had one lady tell me that she hadn't slept in 3 days because her dogs are going crazy, and she had to go get medication for them to calm them down. It shouldn't be that hard for us to get the message out to the community.
Right.
I think we did a good job in enforcement, but we obviously didn't do a good job in communications.
Well, I think we put the information out to the community in all the ways we normally do. We did a lot of blasts out of information. It's just the residents did not comply at this point. And so whether that's didn't want to, they didn't feel the need to, I'm not sure. But there obviously was a lot of non-compliance that night. But again, I think you also need to realize it wasn't just us. It was all across the metro area too. So even though we had our complaints, I guarantee every other city, as they saw by the numbers, they got as many calls, some of them more than we did. And that was throughout the Denver metro area. So I just showed the agencies surrounding us, but it's that way across the entire Denver metro area. It was, I think somebody put it as the worst they've ever seen in their entire career. And 30 years, it's probably the worst I've ever seen for the amount of fireworks that were going up and then the types of fireworks. Obviously, those have changed over the years as well. So I think those we need to look at as well.
Thank you, Commander Walt. I hope that I was not directing my comments so much to you or your police officers. I was really directing my comments to council and the city manager and our city attorney. You know, we're the ones that are responsible to get the message out. You guys did a wonderful job, and I hope that you heard me from the very beginning, giving you credit for that. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
But we as council and city manager and attorney, maybe we can do better. Maybe we can't. Maybe we just throw in the towel, you know, and just say we can't do any better. I think we can do better. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. More people can chime in. I'm going to take my turn. As most people know, this is a passionate item for me. And so when I think back to the conversation we had a year ago, I was pretty fired up. And the data, the statistics that you provided in your memo, I think is why. Last year, we didn't have enforcement on it. And we brought that forward. We passed the ordinance. You put together a plan and you made significant improvement. So I just want to say thank you, because that really shows that, you know, we put the steps in place and you guys tackled it and did an amazing job. The other piece that I appreciate is the comparison data, because if you tell a resident, you know, we have 5,000 or so households, 61 citations, to that resident that was disappointed and frustrated, 61 may seem like a small number. But to put it side by side with other cities, Thornton is 4 times our size. I mean, so much bigger. And they also had a really strict policy on no fireworks. And so this just really shows that our team worked hard. So I had a question, because I don't know if this is even something that you can quantify or estimate, but how long does one fireworks call last?
Well, I think the thing is it depends on, again, from the time the officer gets dispatched to the caller, there's drive time. So again, we try to minimize that drive time by keeping the officers in certain areas. So hopefully that response was much quicker than if we just had them anywhere throughout the city. Second thing is they've got to locate it and determine whether they have probable cause. Then they have to get all the information of the person. They have to verify the information, and then they have to write the summons. So depending on how that is, again, I had people paired up. So some were doing one part of that and some were doing the other. It could take anywhere from, I'm going to say, and this is just a what I'm saying is a probable average is somewhere around 10 to 30 minutes per fireworks ticket. Now, I'm going to say the guys and girls were working really hard on the 4th of July, trying to get them done and get to the next call because the calls were stacking up. So they were hurrying through that process, trying to get that information done. So, and one other thing I just want to point out real quick, just so you understand that night, officers were having to deal with a lot of other things that we wouldn't typically normally have to see. And the one thing I didn't tell you about earlier, the chief mentioned it a little bit, is we had a lot of crowds that when the officers showed up, they started taunting the officers. They were obviously calling some names. He talked about one officer, but they also surrounded on 2 separate calls. The crowd surrounded the patrol car. One of them, they just surrounded it. They were yelling at the officers, taunting them. The other call, they surrounded and started pounding on the hoods. So when you're talking about time, now my officers also are having to deal with making sure that they're working on that. So some of those calls took a little longer than others just because of what they were dealing with out there, because there were people that were unhappy. And so we were trying to mitigate that as well in dealing with those calls. So just to give you a comparison, some of the calls could be as quick as, 10 minutes maybe. I'm going to say that's probably, if the officers are doing everything as quick as they can, it's probably about a 10-minute thing. On average, though, it's probably closer from 10 to 30 minutes. Just because, again, all the stuff that they have to make sure that they've got in place to actually issue a summons.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's really important to know, and also to know the difference between the total number of calls and the fireworks calls is 124. So you had 124 other calls for other behavior, other kind of unruly behavior. I had a couple of residents reach out to me describing situations in their neighborhoods, and they sounded pretty busy, pretty intense. And I thank your officers for doing all that work, because it was a hard day. It was a hard day, and I certainly appreciate it. And comparison last year to this year, comparison city by city, you did an extremely awesome job, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry I couldn't get the numbers to you guys earlier. I know you guys were getting the complaints, but again, I was waiting for some of that comparison to come in. And then we also wanted to make sure we had all of our summons turned in and everything. So I want to make sure I got you as accurate numbers as I possibly could.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Commander Waltz? No? Okay. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All righty, so our next agenda item is a discussion item B, and it's called Council Protocol, Prioritization of Council Requests, and Council Staff Roles. So this is a presentation, a discussion between myself, our city attorney, and our city manager. I just wanted to set the stage a little bit. I had sent an email. Everyone got the same one that just sort of put some thinking on paper. And I want to pull up my copy. I had it a second ago and I lost it. Okay. Just to kind of give some background on how we landed with this discussion item, we do not want to rehash the council protocols. We don't want to go down that road again. We've done that a couple of times already. Little bit of just wanting to have space for council to ask any questions or clarify any pieces that over the last couple of months have been unclear to you. So if you have a wondering, we wanted to create a space to have that conversation. Couple of pieces that I had added in my email. So number one was to be able to address questions, concerns, or clarifications of our council protocol. Number two, the prioritization of council ideas. In one of our pre-COVID study session work nights, we didn't finish that conversation. And so thinking through, do we need to come up with that plan? We had some ideas on how we could do it systematically. We had, we kind of just were in the brainstorming place, but we didn't land anywhere. And so we wanted to make sure that all of the new ideas that are coming forward, there is a space for that, for all of council to consider that. And then the second one was, what is our role with this PD assessment that has come out? It was released to everyone on the other day, on the 10th, I believe. And so as we look at that document and we look at, what are our next steps with that, having a discussion together tonight about what is our role in that. And then if it's appropriate, having a conversation about any, what is our trust level of our staff? Because when we think back, and I wanted Corey to kind of give us another, talking to about our council roles and what we do versus, and what our style of government is and how it's structured, just to figure out how to move forward on some of these big issues that we have. So those were kind of the four pieces to talk about tonight for this discussion item. I sent an email to everyone with kind of my summary of conversations I've had with 9 or 10 of you, to be able to say, these are some things I'm noticing we all are on the same page about. And so I did have a proposal about how we can move forward on Wednesday, but we can hold that till the end. Does anybody have any questions before we start? Or Corey, did you want to jump in?
I'm certainly happy to whenever you're ready.
Go ahead.
Okay. When I do the council orientation, I typically finish with a discussion about the form of government. And what I hope the takeaway is from that discussion is that at the end of the day, regardless of what we're talking about, it is the job of all of the people that work directly and indirectly for the city council to get information to you as the governing body so you can make the best decisions possible. And so the form of government, if you will, has the city manager certainly implementing the policies of the city council. But I think equally, if not more importantly, it is the idea that it's our job to respond to your needs, whatever those needs may be, and provide you the information to make the best decisions possible based on the best possible information. I typically hesitate to give you my personal opinion, but in this case, I'm going to give you my personal opinion. I think with COVID, with everything that's happened over the past several weeks related to the police department, I think the way in which we communicate has been challenged. We're not meeting in person. We don't have sort of the norms in terms of the flow of communication. And so I'm going to use the Civilian Oversight Board as an example. There's been a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of kind of venting in my mind. But at the end of the day, if there is a desire by the city council to look at some sort of police oversight board, I would suggest to you that the way our governmental structure is set up, give us the direction. And that direction doesn't necessarily mean we want X. It might mean give us a whole host of choices on what we could look at in terms of creating a civilian oversight board, because that's what staff's role is. Staff's role is to get you the best possible information so that you can make the best possible decisions. And there are a whole host of options, a whole host of models. And it's a good example in my mind of how the form of government should work, which is we'd like to look at, pick a number of types of models. We bring them back to you with all of the backup information, with all the options. You can direct that they're within our form of government. You could even say we'd like to see what it looks like to see one that might require a charter amendment. But at the end of the day, give us the direction to bring you the information. And at least in my view, under our form of government, we can get you the best possible information so you can make the best possible decision and get to a point where you're, I think, reacting to a lot of the constituent concerns that we've been hearing about over the last several weeks.
Heather, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Mayor Lighty. I mean, to echo what City Attorney Hoffman shared, staff exists for a reason. And, it's been interesting to listen to the different comments, concerns, and issues that have been raised over the last few weeks. And I agree with Corey's comment that COVID has changed and impacted the way we work. I serve at the pleasure of mayor and council, and I'm here to advise you on how to move forward with different elements of policy implementation based on your direction. I think it's important to note that throughout COVID and really COVID aside, staff's going to make mistakes, and there have been fumbles during COVID-19, but we're human. And the majority of staff who serve this community, we're a service organization, and we're all human. And I think it's of concern to me, and I quite frankly would like to know what concerns exist, if they do, in terms of level of trust with staff, because we need to talk about it and we need to address it. And I, as manager, need to have that ability to address it. It's unhealthy to continue to move forward in the manner in which some of what the meetings have resulted in recent weeks. And, I've been disappointed in that. And really, we have a lot of great things happening in this community. There's a lot of hard work happening in the middle of a global health pandemic. And I don't want to lose sight of it. I have staff nearing burnout. I took a few days last week, as you know, because I was at that point and had to consciously say it's time for me to step away, come back refreshed, knowing that there is so much more on the horizon in the week ahead and in the months ahead. We have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of work to do with our police department. We can talk about the PD assessment a little bit later, but I think there is a lot happening. And, I hope that I have the trust of all of you. I've done check-ins with many of you. Some of you, told me that you didn't need to have a check-in with me and have shared openly with me different feedback on, where we're headed and that sort of thing. So I want to make sure that the result of tonight's conversation is that council's clear on the protocol that's really designed to help each and every one of you be effective as policymakers within this community, and that that myself and my directors and staff collectively, we're going to execute on what you direct me to bring forward. So I'll stop there, and certainly happy to answer any questions, address any concerns that you might have.
I see Councilmember Mullica has her blue hand up.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just a little confused about what it is that we're actually talking about here. I feel like some people have some concerns about something specific, but they're not saying about what that specific thing is. I'm just really confused about what we're talking about.
I can take it point by point. So the first one was just having a space to ask any questions about the protocol that we revised and approved. If there's questions about it, if there's concerns about it, if there's clarification that's needed, we wanted to make sure there was a space for that. And so if I stop talking and no one has a question, then we can move on. But we want to make sure that as we're moving through here, because Heather and I had received some questions about different things. And Julie, you and I spoke specifically, but there was some question about who gets information in what timeliness, in what format. And so just making sure that everyone had a space to say, yeah, I've been wondering about that. And how come that works that way? But if nobody has a question, then we can move on. But we wanted to make sure there was a space for that.
Okay. I don't have any questions about the protocol. I'm good.
Does anybody else? Okay. Oh, Councilmember Brown.
I think I do. So
Okay.
To use a current example, and not to get anybody stressed out, but to use a current example of the task force that came through to city council, right? With the police reform and stuff like that. So with that, right now, what we should have done is should have handed it off to Corey. Are we deciding if we're handing it off to Corey and staff? Is that nothing we're talking about? I am a little confused. I apologize.
So that's coming up. He used it as an example. I think it's really the second bullet. It's the how are we prioritizing council ideas? That's that piece that we didn't finish. And that has come up recently as how do we decide which council idea gets moved forward at which pace, right? How do council ideas come forward to all of council before we move in a direction? Is there, that was a piece that we kind of, it was just incomplete. We didn't finish talking about it, but it's critical that everyone on council has space and has a process to bring forward an idea, either of their own or from residents. So how do we do that in a way that is inclusive of all council and that we all get to consider it and say, okay, well, Antonio has a great idea for how he wants to use some of our land, but he hasn't had a chance to bring that forward yet. So how do we balance some of these ideas, I guess?
And that's the outside of if something's going to take 4 hours for Corey to do, we have to come as a group and agree that he can spend the 4 hours on that. That's outside of that.
Well, I don't know, Heather, if you have the protocol pulled up, I certainly can if we want to project it and look at it. But I think they are two different things.
Okay.
Heather, can you speak to that?
I'll shut up.
Sure.
No, it's okay.
Councilmember Brown, great question. So you may recall that council had that discussion about the hour piece, and I had recommended to council that we remove that hourly requirement. Certainly it applies to Corey, our city attorney, because he bills the city on an hourly basis. But for me as manager and the time that I've been here and the way that I've seen prioritization work in other communities, it's more of an art, not a science to this. So I have included additional recommended changes for council's consideration as to what that looks like. So when council discussed the protocol back, I believe in March, it was then brought forward, I want to say in April, and council approved it via resolution. However, even since that point in time, there have still been some questions and gray areas, if you will, that have been identified as to how does this really work? It seemed to make sense at the point when we were all in agreement that this will work. But as we've worked through some of these different issues, I think, in short, there's opportunity to make some adjustments to really better reflect what I think helps clarify intent and expectation. And so when you look at protocols 2 and 3, I've made some recommended clarification adjustments to what is a simple informational request. And so this is where I have this type of request involves the need for information on a project, program, service, or policy that already exists. I think this was a source of hang up for some of you, and I don't mean that negatively. It's just, does it fall under protocol 2? Does it fall under 3? These are the types of requests in my mind that I respond immediately. It's easy. I have the information at my fingertips, or a staff member has the information at their fingertips, or you submit a request through Access Northglenn app, our CRM system. Now, protocol 3, request for a research topic, I've further clarified that this type of request involves the need to have additional information on a program, service, policy, or community partnership that already exists and is more involved in gathering information than a response to a simple request. So it's not uncommon that I'll get a request for something that I need to take a step back, connect with a director or a staff member, and get information history on why we did what we did. If I wasn't here, 5 years from now, I'll be able to say, oh yeah, in 2020, council made the decision, but because I'm 2 years into my role, there's a certain reference point that I have, and other staff members who have been here longer have that reference point and can easily recall information. Sometimes I ask Joanna for help on looking up information to get clarity on when council made certain decisions, whether it be via ordinance or resolution. And so there's some clarification on that protocol 3. Now, protocol 4 does not exist in our protocol today. So this is an addition to capture what Mayor Leidy was talking about, in that council had started talking about prioritization of new requests. That really got put on hold because of COVID-19. And additionally, we've put so much on hold related to the strategic plan because of our financial situation and the uncertainty of COVID-19. So as we continue to move through our recovery and hear good news, such as Jason shared tonight, in terms of our financial position, while it's still an impact, there's greater flexibility in that than what I could advise you and share with you back in late March, early April. And so with protocol 4, this type of request involves the need for something new that is not in the current city council strategic plan, and has policy implications, operational impacts, and needs to be fully vetted by city council and city staff. So this is a new process that I've outlined in keeping with the approach to protocols 2 and 3 that I hope captures the ability for a council member, whether individually or as a team, to bring forward requests, but gives me the ability to hear the request and do the appropriate research and information gathering to come back to council and say, okay, this is what you're asking for. Here's what it's going to take and to either implement this item, what it's going to cost budget-wise, or no, we can't do this, and here's why. We can do this, and here's how you accomplish this. It really depends on the item. So that's a piece that, again, is new. And so then related to agenda management, if you move forward, Mayor, and then certainly we can jump back and I can answer any questions based on the recommended language that I've provided. This is a piece that our existing protocol really doesn't speak to, and that's the fact that I set the agenda for the meetings. The mayor's the presiding officer at the meetings and may provide me with input or feedback on the organization of the meeting in an effort to streamline the flow of council meetings. So this is a relationship that's unique in terms of the manager working with the mayor on preparing for the meeting ahead. So each week, Joanna and I, and this is somewhat new since I've been here in terms of including Joanna in these meetings. I think it's a great approach. It's a streamlined approach. Joanna has a wealth of information that I don't have. And so she's able to really provide perspective on what council's done in the past and how they've approached different things. So collectively, Joanna and I meet with the mayor on a weekly basis, and we walk through the tentative future agendas. And so what I'm trying to do is capture that process under agenda management, which based on the existing protocol, it's silent. And I think that was just an oversight as we move forward with that council adopting the protocol that we have. I also included a piece which is included in 4 to speak to my effort to manage the length of the meetings as best I can. I know this has been an issue for some council members, and there's things that have come up within recent meetings. We've had some really long meetings. There's meetings where we've had extended public comment. There are meetings like tonight where we have not had public comment. All of those different factors affect the length of a meeting. There's also been concern shared by council members about the length of PowerPoint presentations, the amount of copy on a PowerPoint presentation. So I hear all that feedback, and I'm continually, not only myself, but working with staff, trying to make adjustments to make sure, I use the phrase, have items teed up and teed up well for council's consideration at each meeting. So these are the primary changes in the remainder of the document. They're just numbering changes based on the addition of Protocol 4. So these are recommended changes that if council is supportive of, what we would do is bring back an amended council protocol document to council on July 27th and have you adopt that protocol document by resolution as you did with the existing protocol document. Overall, all intended to help clarify, further clarify our processes.
Councilmember Goff, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was trying to read your lips. I thought that's what you Thank you. Since I'm relatively new to the city council, I do have a little confusion, I guess, about the protocol 2, about the types of requests for simple information. And that is that I'm not sure I would know where to draw the line as to what is of interest to other council members. So, I mean, I get resident requests all the time. We got one today about, could the city set up or somehow arrange to have mobile farmers markets or something along those lines. And so, I mean, if it were to happen, I guess that would be something like the food truck grab and go, where it would be, affect the whole city. But I mean, I don't know, making that request, if that's, if that's something. I mean, we all get so many emails, and I know we just recently had kind of a little discussion about forwarding citizen requests. So that's the only thing that I'm a little, do I just say, well, I'll just send it to Heather, and Heather, you decide if it needs to be forwarded to everybody? Is that like the best way to do it?
Well, I think with this particular example that you're using, Councilmember Goff, it's not a simple request in my mind would be, do we have a farmer's market, or has the city ever considered a farmer's market? I interpreted the request as we'd like to have this. So when I respond to you, so we'll just play this out. I think it's my role to say, okay, this is really a request for something new. And so I would advise you, but I want to get some history, which is why I haven't responded to your email.
That's fine. I'm not.
Because I want to know, well, why don't we have farmers markets? Because I know it's been talked about, and specifically, I think there's been an interest expressed to have them have a farmers market at the marketplace, if I recall correctly. But we haven't gotten there yet. So I want to get more history on when was the last time council discussed that, or at what point was staff working on something related to this, and then respond to you and let you know, this would be something new. So I'd encourage you to bring it forward to a council meeting. And if it's something you feel strongly about, share it with council. And then if council supports you in that and that collective support, then I would be given direction to look at what it would take to create, whether it be mobile or a farmer's market.
Okay, well, so my idea that if I'm not sure, I should just send it to you, and then you'll get back to me on whether it's something that needs to go to the whole council.
Yes, and I have been trying to be very intentional, and I think some of you have laughed when I've done this, so I'm going to laugh along with you when I use follow-up protocol 2 or protocol 4. I'm just trying to let you know this is a protocol that I'm following, and that's why I'm sharing it. A good example of a request for simple information that I will share with all of council that came to Councilmember Goff was the question from a resident about ambulance fees. So I wasn't aware of that program that North Metro Fire District offers. So it's on my to-do list for tomorrow to send council an email to let them know you received that request. This is information that Chief had provided to us, and that we're going to make an effort to publicize that program to our residents, because I don't believe we have.
Right. Okay. Yes, I think it does. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think, Catherine, to your point, there are some gray areas for sure. And so it's better just to ask. We had talked again pre-COVID when we were having this conversation about the prioritization piece. We had talked about adding it as a standing agenda item under communications. And so we had it on a couple of them, and I forgot. So I was like, what, we're talking about this prioritization thing tonight? And it was, no, this is the space for the council ideas. So we may need to call it something else, or we may need to just agree that it happens during communications. But just to have a standing space at every meeting to bring those forward as necessary. Councilmember Goff.
And I like what we're trying to do here, as far as I understand it. But in your example, then in the communications piece, if I were to have brought up, say, I'm just using this example, the mobile farmers market, or whatever it's going to be. Is the city council as a whole at that point going to discuss it? I mean, I didn't think communications was a discussion. So now I'm confused again.
Well, and maybe that's not where we put it. Maybe we call it something else and we add an agenda item. But we can, because there's been times where someone has brought up something in communications from a committee and it's become a discussion. When we think about our legislative update, that's also there. So that could be where it is. But again, to use Corey's example, if you bring forward the idea of farmers markets and council goes, yeah, that's a really great idea, then we hand it off to staff, right? It's not then, we're going to create a committee to develop farmers markets. Like, no, we say, thank you, staff. This is the direction we'd like you to go. And then we hand it off.
Okay.
So that's a really good example. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's an item that could end up being in a separate study session. And I'll advise you, based on having the ability to do the research and really figure out as much information as possible in working with staff to say, here are your options. But the greater piece of importance that I can't stress enough here is the reason why we have to prioritize is because there's so many needs and wants. And I have limited capacity to meet those needs and wants on a daily, if not annual basis. And so I have to have the ability as manager to make sure I can sustain our current level of service. And then when we add programs and services, in my mind, that triggers an increase in level of service. And you can do that and maintain your existing staffing level for a period of time before you reach a point where I, as manager, have to say, this program will require an increase in staffing. This program will require an increase in funding. And that's not bad. That's just an important conversation to have. So that way you, as a council, have all the information you need to make sure that you want to make that commitment, that you want to implement that program and move forward.
Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. And as I listen to Councilmember Goff and City Manager Geyer on this, I'm reminded of the concept of transparency. And I really, really support the revisions of these protocols as have been presented to us tonight, because I think that brings us back to this aspect of transparency. And then I also think then that allows staff to do their job. And I think in a lot of times, in some, sometimes our zest and our zeal, quite frankly, our professionals on staff have maybe been undercut and put in untenable situations. And so to answer the original question as posed when the discussion started, I have fundamental, absolute, 1,000% confidence, trust, faith in our staff. And I think the revisions of this protocol as stand is a pragmatic step to show that trust to our staff, and then show that trust to our fellow council members as well, with everything being there and clear and transparent. You all saw an email I sent this week, and it was purposely to everybody on council. And it was something real simple that I heard from almost everybody at the grab and go events and at Ashley and our last ward meeting, which was big time speeding on a couple major drag strips in Ward 1. And so not just because it's my ward and Ashley's ward, but that was something to where, as we're looking at citywide issues to remedy, these types of problems, I wanted to make sure that everybody on council, even though it's probably one of those you just read and leave, okay, thanks. But I think that idea of being transparent and sharing, if this is going to take staff time, if this is going to be, and that's still in our strategic plan, but if this is going to be something that's going to require staff time and focus, it's fair for everybody to be aware of it ahead of time. And so I think the revisions of these protocols are an essential step forward in that. And I think we need to move forward on them. And I think, we need to adhere to them.
Thank you. Councilmember Mullicup.
Hi. All right. So, I actually don't have a problem with the additions in the protocol. I think they do help clarify some things. I think I definitely figured out what we're talking about now. So a lot of people are frustrated and upset the way that Jenny and I moved forward with working with residents and trying to bring their ideas to the table. And at the time, we didn't really break any protocols. And so I think that this clarifies some things. So I think that's a great way to move all of us forward. I think it's really important that we remember that as council members, it's our job to bring ideas to the table, to bring our residents' ideas to the table. That's who we represent. That is why we are here. So I will continue to keep doing that. And I hope that my council members will support me in that. And I think you guys will. I think that really we work we direct staff in how to move forward on a variety of projects we want to see happen in our community. And so I think that this gives us a little bit more of that framework, which I think is helpful. So, I mean, I think that these are good additions, but please keep bringing ideas forward. And if we have to announce them at a formal meeting, I am not against transparency in any way. I think that actually the way that Jenny and I approached it, we were actually trying to encourage transparency. We didn't want any ideas or any decisions to be made prior to council discussion. And we can't have staff move forward on anything unless we discuss it as a council. So that was the intent of the route that we made. So, I mean, I think moving forward, this just puts us all in a better position.
Thank you. Any other council members want to weigh in? Councilmember Downing. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Just hit the wrong button at the wrong time. But anyway, I do support the additions to the protocols, and I think they've been needed for quite a while. I think, you know, it's all a learning experience, what we go through. Nothing is stagnant. Everything is fluid and flexible. I think just to remind council that no individual council person should direct staff, but we as a group, as a council, can come together and talk about the different ideas and then make a decision together. So I think these different protocols and the additions that you have here are a good start.
Thank you. Does anyone not agree, I guess, or have any different suggestions for the revisions that were in the memo? Councilmember Brown.
I think the only comment I have to make is that it's very clear and concise, you know, and it has the way that we do things, we've kind of slipped and not let staff handle things that they should be handling. So I think this will get us back on track as a council too, so that we can pay attention to the other needs of the city while working through everything else. I agree with everything.
Okay, thank you. So this was kind of going back to if we weren't super clear with the purpose. So those revisions and having that prioritization piece in there, that was the purpose of this discussion item. I wanted to have space if people wanted to have a discussion about the proposal. I can explain it again if that's helpful. The proposal in my email was more about what should we really be doing on Wednesday. And so based on conversations, these were not my ideas. It was just a collection of conversations with everyone and thinking this might help us move forward with more urgency, with the urgency that our residents are really asking for, if that makes sense. And so I know I heard back from most of you, either that made sense, I get it, or I had a conversation with a couple of you on the phone, but I didn't hear from everyone. So if we wanted to take just a few minutes and kind of sort out the information in that email, or if people had questions, do you want me to summarize my conclusion? No, Antonio's like, whatever. So for the good of the group, I'll just do it fast, okay? So basically, thinking through the fact that we agree on 4 main pieces, just talking to every single person, we agree that we need transparency and accountability and that we can do better when it comes to diversity and equity, and that it's something that we need to do and that residents play a key part. So every single person I talked to said those 4 things in some way. And so thinking through what we had in place for Wednesday, it felt to me, based on conversations I've had with you, that it was an extra step. And so what I had summarized, and you can just say yes or no. Like I said, this is just the proposal, is that today we ask Corey and Heather to go forth with some ideas on citizen oversight. If you've had a chance to look at the PD assessment results, you'll see that was one of the recommendations. They call it something different. Heather, do you have that term?
It's called co-production policing, and it's a term that comes from the 21st Century Report on Policing. That was a task force under the Obama administration. So it's a very progressive, dynamic approach, different than traditional policing models. So more and more organizations across the country and there's no one right way to do it. So that's something that council can consider. And really ultimately is the Police Oversight Board in some way, shape, or form that council's discussing.
Totally. So knowing that feels like the direction that we're going, if we were to ask Corey and Heather to move forward, not only because it's a recommendation in the assessment, but also because it's been a conversation that we've been having with residents and with each other. So if we do that, and then I put in there, I can't speak for them, but I would think that we could have information at least by August 10th, that they can answer that if that deadline. So if we just start there, like, how do you feel about making that request as a council to our staff? Mayor Pro Tem, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you for bringing this up. I mean, I think this is certainly exactly what Councilmember Mullica and I were asking for, was to have a big conversation about this and to look at different models. So if this request in sending it over to staff to do the research that's needed to develop these different options is, a next step that folks can agree on, I think it's certainly one that we had intended. So I support it.
Okay, and I saw a thumbs up from Antonio. Does anyone else want to speak to that? Just more thumbs up. Councilmember Downing, did you want to speak to it or just thumbs up?
I just was going to say that I think that's the appropriate steps to take is to move forward with staff.
Okay. Councilmember Goff?
Yes, I think that it would be, I've done some research on different kinds and forms of police oversight, and it's there is no one size fits all. They're all different. So I think it would be good to have someone who knows, how our city works and what our demographics are to do some of that initial research. And I'm assuming that this is going to sort of fall under the Diversity and Equity Task Force or board or whatever that's going to be. Or is this something completely different?
Those are two separate things. So this would be something that we would ask Corey and Heather to do. Let me see if Councilmember Peterson wants to talk to that, and then I can move to the second topic, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
I don't want to talk to that, but I want to just say, as we bring this to staff, please remember, everybody on council, that there were also 4 good recommendations from the Department of Justice on the presentation we had 2 weeks ago. Right, 2 weeks ago, that the information we got that the Department of Justice had, for lack of a better phrase, war gamed this, right, and put out different scenarios and things like that. And so that's for us to take a look at, maybe staff to incorporate those suggestions from the Department of Justice as well. Thank you.
So thank you. So Catherine, to my next proposal. So if we're going to go forward with that, then on the 15th, so that's Wednesday, we had set aside an extra study session. We could really spend the time, because this is one of those things in our strategic plan, to work on that diversity and equity task force. And I apologize, I'm reading it off of my email, but Rupa had a nice title for it. So if we worked on that. One of the things I put in my email that I just wanted everyone to understand was the timeline for all of this takes time. And so when we know that we have to take something to first reading and second reading and then resolution or ordinance, depending on which direction we go, but that takes time. And we know that we have an urgency. And so there was conversation around not creating a committee to create a committee, but to really just jump in and do this one. So if council wanted to do the work on Wednesday, this is that broader community group that will tackle diversity and equity issues citywide. They will also, I mean, it is a separate piece, right? If we're having Heather and Corey talk about the citizen oversight of our law enforcement, what that looks like, that's over here. But then the diversity and equity group, if we spend time on Wednesday figuring out who's going to be in it, what's going to be our process, how are we going to conduct the interviews, how do we communicate and sell it? I think if we spend the time on Wednesday, we can get that moving much more quickly. And we can really dig in and get that done. So I was just recommending that we spend time on Wednesday putting that together and getting all of those ideas ready to go so that we can get it into the August connection and we can start conducting those interviews as soon as possible to pull that group together quickly.
Okay, so I'm clarifying that these are two different groups at this point, and today we're just agreeing to have Heather and Corey do some research and bring us some models or some ideas about the citizen police oversight, whatever, task force group. And then Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the diversity and equity task force board, whatever it is that we're going to call that one. So those two different things. Okay, got it.
Yes, that is the recommendation. Mayor Pro Tem?
Sounds good.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering if maybe you could clarify, or Heather or Corey could clarify. So we're sending the citizen oversight task force and like building up a model for us to consider over to staff, but we're going to go through the process of building a diversity and inclusion task force, like without the help of GARE. I'm just trying to understand, like, how are we using our resources? Are we prepared for that conversation? Or are we just like, I just want to make sure that we're using our time as effectively as possible.
Would you
That's
like
a
me to
really good discussion? Yeah.
respond to that? So here's my thinking, two separate police oversight board over here. And so the research that Corey and I are going to do, we're going to bring you back options that will then culminate in whatever that oversight board looks like, whether it's temporary or permanent. Those are all conversations and discussion points that council will have at a later date. And Corey and I can talk tomorrow about the August 10th suggested date, and we'll get something on the tentative future agenda. So you'll have that before the end of the week. The diversity, inclusivity, and social equity board, we've tweaked the name based on RUPA's recommendation. Originally, we were calling it a race and equity task force. I guess you could say RUPA and I in conversation in hearing the different discussions councils had, do we want to keep leading you down the path of form a task force to then ultimately say you should form a board, to ultimately recommend to council to form a board? Or let's go ahead and jump into this 100%, form a diversity, inclusivity, and social equity board, which would be a permanent board like Planning Commission, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. So not a task force as in how we formed the homelessness task force, which is really an advisory group, but a board that we need to get stood up in terms of making sure they get the training that council is going to get. So this would be in parallel with the education and learning that council is going to undergo. And RUPA's made some headway in narrowing our options down to two potential facilitators. And we may end up actually using both of them because they bring value in different ways to the table. So we want to go ahead and just move forward with, let's get this board created, because it will require an ordinance. So you have the initial study session that can happen on Wednesday, and that's what we're preparing for. And so we have information that'll get added to the packet tomorrow. I just reviewed that today, and we've got a few tweaks to make to it. So you'll have that in advance of Wednesday's meeting. There'll need to be based on council feedback, a first reading, second reading, but we'll miss the August connection if we don't move quickly on this. Now, council can say, no, this is too fast. Let's slow it down a little bit. But I'm ultimately advising you, the task force was the initial thought laid out in the strategic plan, and that was a great thought. But based on all of the conversation that council has had over the last several weeks and the commitment through the adoption of the resolution, advancing racial equity work tonight, and everything that I've heard expressed in terms of a form of commitment by council, I think council's ready to take this next step with forming a permanent board to do this work. And this is going to be expansive work. So, when we talk about diversity, inclusivity, and social equity, what I think about is, looking at best practices. City of Boulder does so much. They've really been a model for staff to look at in terms of how can we take what we do for Pride Month to the next level. They paint crosswalks in Pride colors. They do other things for staff as well as community members. So this board would be all encompassing and really take a look at what do we need. Now, the other parallel aspect of this is the internal staff group that will organize, call it a committee, that will really start to work on development of that racial equity lens tool that we talked about, that will work in partnership with GARE. Now, given the timing of everything that's happening across the nation, GARE's been inundated with requests from organizations across the country. So they recommended one of the facilitators to us that has done previously worked through National League of Cities. And part of why these two individuals broke out on their own and have formed their own consulting group is because they weren't able to really take the work to the next level. They did foundational work, but I'm really interested in going beyond that foundational work and doing the harder work that's involved in assessing all of our programs, our policies, and making sure that we are removing those barriers that we're not conscious of and that have existed for years, because that's the way we've done things. And so I've just shared probably a lot more than you originally probably wanted to know, but that's what I'm thinking about in terms of how this board can work in partnership with the internal staff committee, in partnership with council, and then we'll figure out through your guidance and overall direction what you want the police oversight board to look like. And there may be some overlap on topics. Does that help, Mayor Pro Tem?
Heather, I guess now I'm confused, only because I think Mayor Pro Tem Wilford raised a really good question. Is this diversity board, is that board something we want to co-create with the GARE facilitator, or is Wednesday's study session a place where we can get our hands dirty and start to develop that?
I think it's the latter. If you want to hold off and we bring a facilitator in and we do that, we can do that. But I think you can do the initial piece of creating the board, and then we bring the facilitator in to do the training and the work that's really focused on what do you want the work to look like? What is the work that you want to do, development of, call it a vision statement, mission statement. Council really set the framework through the strategic plan and the strategic priority on diversity of this is what council sees as the focus. So it would be the work of this board to take it to that next level and that next step.
Did that help, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I'm just a little confused in terms of, like, we've got staff building out what one committee or one board is going to look like, but we're going to figure out as a council what this other board is going to look like. And I guess I'm just confused because it feels like there are two very different processes happening for two boards that are.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think we had talked about, like, it's not.
And if folks are fine with it, that's fine. I just want to ask the question.
It's a really good question. We had talked about it as similar to the homelessness task force, right? We talked as a council about what that could look like. And then, of course, then staff went forward. And so maybe it's a study session about what this diversity board could look like, and that we don't actually finalize anything, or we can postpone it. I think it's probably worth having a discussion since we set aside the time. But I hear what you're saying. Does anyone else want to? Well, let's see. Corey, do you want to weigh in? You've had your hand up.
Well, I put my hand up before the conversation somewhat changed a bit, but I do want to say that as it relates to the Police Oversight Board, and the task of us bringing back options, I do know that some of you have done kind of independent research, and I know Councilmember Goff mentioned that. There is no magic to this. So if any council members have models that they specifically want me to look at and look at how it might be modified for Northland, by all means, the more information I have from the more sources, the better product I can provide to council. So please don't hesitate. If there are certain models that any of you like, send them to me and I can add them into the mix for what we present to you either on August 10th or at some other date in the near future.
Councilmember Goff.
Okay, hopefully I'm going to not lose my thread here. I think if I'm understanding this right, I am okay with the plan that we've got going here, where today we're asking staff to bring us some models to discuss at a future date, because I know some of the questions or suggestions or requests I've gotten from residents may or may not actually be legal. So in terms of police oversight, or they would require us putting something on the ballot to change a city ordinance. And so that to me, I think, is one of the reasons why the process might be different. And so this racial and equity task force, or whatever the new name is, I can't remember now, social justice, whatever. That one, I think we could give some like a broad overview of what that's going to be, and how we would interview people to be on it, or how we want to do that, or how we want to get the information out, those kind of things. And I'm really much more interested in getting the ball rolling. And so I do think it would be important to have that discussion on Wednesday so that we can get it out to our residents in the North Glen Connection and social media or wherever else, and get some involvement, get some sense of who wants to be involved in it, whatever, input we're going to get back on that, and to be able to move forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Escobar.
Thank you, Mayor. I forget how you worded it, but you gave us two choices. One was to actually discuss what the board, who would be on or forming this board, or discussing what the board would look like and what would be the mission, purpose, hopeful outcomes and I prefer the latter. I don't think that we should wander off into the bushes without gear. And, but I think we can get our thoughts together so that when that happens, when we do get a facilitator, we have a better understanding of what it is we're actually looking for.
So can I ask a clarifying question? So what pieces, can you just repeat that for me? What pieces do you feel we can tackle on Wednesday?
Well, what is it? What's the board's role? What do we want? This inclusive diversity, what does that mean? If nothing else, just attaching a definition to what diversity means, inclusiveness means. I mean, we all, everybody has an idea of who should sit on this board, but do we need a board of 25, a board of 6, a board of 80? I don't know.
Okay.
But I think the discussion would be more along the lines of what is it that we want to get done rather than let's put a board together.
Okay. So you're in favor of meeting on Wednesday to discuss that topic?
Well, either that or not meeting at all.
Okay. Councilmember Downing.
I'm a bit confused about it. I'm not opposed to a diversity board or whatever name we put attached to it. But I'm just wondering, because we'll have 9 people with a lot of ideas. And so I think a facilitator is someone that's going to try to help us work through this whole process. Just wondering, is the staff going to bring any ideas? Because this could be a meeting of, there's 9 of us and we all have ideas. And so I don't know, I'm struggling with what we will accomplish on Wednesday night, because I don't know if staff is going to bring us any ideas, to help us walk through some of our ideas, good or bad. I just don't know. So I'm struggling with the board. Not that I'm opposed to it. I'm not. I'm just struggling with what we are going to accomplish on Wednesday and how we're going to accomplish it.
Great question. Heather, do you have an answer to that?
Of course I do. So staff will provide you with a framework for council to react to, a framework of what a board could look like. And so that'll be the launching point for council to say, I like this, I like the number, I like the draft application, I like that, I like this. But the premise would be it's a permanent board, like Planning Commission, like Parks and Rec Advisory Board, that the big commitment that council's making is to get it stood up sooner than later. So when I say stood up, it means getting the advertisement that council's made this commitment to advancing racial equity through the creation of this board and through the adoption of the resolution this evening. And that this board, you're going to be looking for community members who want to be part of shaping what the work looks like. So it's really, we're going to provide you with a framework to react to. And you may say, yep, right on target, or no, we kind of want to look at some other options. And you have that ability. You just have to keep in mind that there's a timing consideration with formation of the board will be via ordinance, which is more permanent. It is permanent. And I think that's significant in talking about this topic because that really demonstrates council's commitment to doing this work and backing the work through that commitment and then the funding that'll come along with it. And I'll be in a better position in a couple weeks to share with you what it's going to cost to get the facilitator to come in and do the council training and then training with the board. But the sooner you can get a board stood up and then get them trained, so there's that base knowledge that's shared by both council, leadership team, and this board, I think is really beneficial in this process.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Councilmember Downing.
So just for me, for clarification, once we go through this activity on Wednesday and decide the framework, then are we to turn this back to staff and have you come back with guidance for us? Or are we going to do the whole thing? I'm just trying to work through this here. So
let me try to explain it a different way. We're going to provide you with a framework. And when I say framework, it's here's our recommendation on what the board looks like: number of members, length of terms, logistical things of that nature that you would find with any of our other permanent boards. And if council approves what that framework looks like, then we would bring forward the first reading at the soonest at July 27th. And then the second reading would come to council and ultimate approval of the board, I believe on August 10th. And so if we have the opportunity to promote that this board's being created and individuals can apply, then we can have applications open for a couple of weeks, get applications, and then council can go through a process. So in providing the framework to you, Rup was also outlining a recommended approach in terms of council interviewing applicants and that sort of thing. So without getting into too much of the detail tonight, the goal would be to provide you with a framework. And this is based on what I've heard council talk about in terms of what's important. And again, the reason why I'm advising that we move forward with a permanent board versus a task force is I think you're going to lose time. And ultimately, you're going to land on that space of the task force recommending that you create a permanent board. And based on the passion and the expression of we need to do this work, I think it makes sense to move it along sooner.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good question. Councilmember Goff.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Heather, you had mentioned something about, at least in certain areas or whatever, that Boulder was really good at doing some of this social justice activities. What is the name of their board? Let's say if I wanted to try to look up what they've got going, like on their website or something, just so I'd have some idea before Wednesday.
I unfortunately don't have it off the top of my head, but we'll email that out to you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And Westminster also, I believe they have a board called their Inclusivity Board. And I've done some initial research, Rupa and I have on their board. I would say Boulder, and this isn't a criticism of Westminster, it's just different. They all look different from city to city. Boulder does a lot, and they've been a model community for communities across the nation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, I would want to start with asking why, and what's the charge that we'd be looking at for this board, right? What would be their purpose? What would be their scope? What would be our goals and their goals? And so as we talk about interviews or members or structures or publication or things like that, I would want to just begin with what would be our ultimate goal with this, and what would be the charge of said committee, especially if this is permanent moving forward. What would we like to get from this? And so I think we should be clear on that as well.
Any other questions? So it sounds like we are going to meet 6 o'clock on Wednesday, and staff will have some information for us to react to and start that jumping off point of a pretty deep conversation. Any other questions about that that we need to answer tonight? No. Okay. Any other questions just in general before we move into the final item on our agenda? Councilmember Brown.
Is it in general or?
Yeah. What do you got?
At some point before we end the call, I'd just like Julie to give a little update on COVID in Colorado. I count on her as my spokesperson.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to do that now? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So
Thank you.
We actually have been seeing a little bit of an increase of cases, slight increase of cases, specifically for Adams County, and it varies by county where we're seeing some of these. So Arapahoe, mainly driven by Aurora, is seeing a slight increase as well. And so, I mean, our positivity rates are still pretty low, and by positivity rate, that means of the number of tests that we are doing, which is increasing, right, all the time because we're getting greater access. The percentage of people who actually test positive remains quite low, which is a good sign. I think a lot of people are really just kind of bracing themselves for what happens when schools start opening in the next couple of weeks. That's kind of the next big thing. How many of those kids are going to be going in person back to school, and what does that mean for students and teachers? And will we see an increase of cases then as well? So, I mean, I think if anything, we're still in a good position. We definitely are not, we're not Texas right now, we're not California right now, so that's great. But I think the major point is that we don't want to be them. We don't want to be California who has to reclose, which is really important, that we, continue to do social distancing and that we continue to wear our masks and do our part. So there's just so many variables at play, and I think a lot of people are just kind of bracing for school. And I know that's my biggest concern right now is, what does this mean for our kids and those teachers and our community as a result of that? So.
Right. Thank you very much, Julie.
Okay, I think we're wrapping up. We do have another section of public invited to be heard. Joanna, do we have anyone that would like to speak to council at this time?
There's nobody who has provided email or voicemail, but I will unmute the phone line. There's, whoops, where did he go? Okay, so the phone lines are unmuted in case there's a member of the public who would like to speak.
Okay, so this is an opportunity for public comment. Statements are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and comments must be related to an item previously addressed by the council during tonight's meeting. Is there anyone on the phone that would like to speak?
I am.
Okay, so please state your name and address and provide your comments to the council.
My name is Nancy Sauter. I live at 283 Garland Drive, North Glen, Ward 3.
Hi, Nancy. What would you like to talk about that we have mentioned tonight?
Well, number one, the fireworks. God bless them all for doing what they did, the police department. That was a concerted effort, and I think that was more political than anything. The other thing is that I truly think that was political. As far as the masks, when this comes out of Tri-County on the 24th, what is North Glen going to do about people not wearing masks? I have a friend that owns a business, and people come into her store and refuse to wear masks. Is there going to be a fine? I mean, what can she do about this? My third question, it's just, never mind. Just those two, please.
Okay, City Manager Geyer, can you respond to our resident about the mask piece?
Yes, thanks, Nancy. Business owners have an ability to have the requirement that masks be worn, and they can call the police department if they find themselves in a situation, and the department will assist in terms of compliance. Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, but previously we've discussed this particular issue, and business owners can have individuals cited for not following the rule. Now with Tri-County Health's order, I don't believe they're issuing any fines or anything like that. So they're hoping to get voluntary compliance. We will have, we're given several pieces of information that we'll start pushing out on social media in terms of Tri-County, I'll call it a hotline, but a phone number of where individuals can reach out to Tri-County when they visit restaurants or businesses that aren't in compliance with the mask order. I will tell you that 2 weeks ago when I talked with Ray Gonzalez, our county manager, Tri-County Health has been spot checking different municipalities in terms of compliance, and the businesses that they've spot checked here in North Glen have done well related to compliance, better compliance than some of our neighboring communities. So we have been getting that information. I have through Ray Gonzalez, and that's good news to be receiving. So we'll be recommending to residents that you reach out to Tri-County Health. Certainly you can reach out to us if you prefer and provide us with the details, and then we'll in turn share that with Tri-County Health as well.
Thank you. And what are you going to do about the schools opening? I mean, personally, I'm sorry, but I think it's crazy. How do you keep elementary children social distance? I mean, please.
Nancy, that is a really good question. We have come to the end of our public comment, but I will let you know that as far as our schools, that's an Adams County, Adams 12 school district decision. And so those questions can be taken to the school board members because they make that decision. But thank you so much for calling in tonight. And
Thank you, Meredith.
You're welcome. And we have come to the end of our meeting. So since we have no further business, we are adjourned. I hope everyone has a great night.